The laundromat on Ninth wasn't the kind of place anyone noticed unless they had to. It sat between a pharmacy and a shuttered tailor shop, its windows fogged in winter and dusty in summer. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the dryers thumped with the same tired rhythm every evening. I came here every Thursday because my apartment building's machine had been broken for 3 months, and because routines were easier than thinking too much. I always came at 7:15, always brought the same canvas bag, always forgot to separate the whites until I was standing in front of the machine. Loneliness, I'd learned, wasn't loud. It was just habits no one interrupted. I'd stand there waiting for the spin cycle, phone in hand, scrolling through messages I never sent. Half-typed things to friends I hadn't seen in months. A draft to my mother asking if she was still mad about Christmas. A message to an ex that had lived in my notes app for 11 weeks and still began with, "Hey, this is random." Every Thursday, I deleted something before I left. That's how I first noticed her. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in the kind of way that made you look twice without meaning to. It was because she folded clothes like she was handling something fragile. Slow, exact movements. Sleeves tucked in neatly, corners aligned, as if giving shape to things mattered. She looked like she was in her mid-40s, maybe older. Dark hair pinned up loosely, strands falling around her face like she'd stopped bothering to fix them. She wore a long coat, even indoors, sleeves rolled back just enough to show her wrists. There was a silver watch on one of them. The first time, I only noticed because she caught me looking, not in a sharp way, just a glance over the rim of the paperback she was reading while her wash cycle ran. Calm, mildly amused. "You're putting detergent in the softener tray," she said. I looked down. I was. Right. I gave a short laugh and moved my hand too quickly, spilling some on the machine. She smiled then. Not big. Just enough. It's fixable. That should have been it. A small embarrassment in a forgettable week. But the next Thursday, she was there again. Same corner machine. Same paperback. Same coat. This time, when I walked in, she looked up before I did. "You remembered the right tray," she said. I actually looked down to check. She laughed, quietly, like she wasn't used to doing it often. That sound stayed with me longer than it should have. Her name was Lena. I found that out on the third Thursday because the owner called out that someone had left a scarf, and she lifted her hand without looking up from her book. "Mine," she said. Her voice was lower than I expected. Warm, but tired around the edges. I don't know when I started timing my week around Thursdays. Maybe around the time I started leaving work early without telling myself why. Maybe around the time I noticed she always came alone, always left alone, always checked her phone once, just once, before slipping it back into her coat pocket. Like she was expecting something she already knew wasn't coming. One night, the dryer jammed. Mine, of course. I stood there jiggling the handle like an idiot while Lena watched me from her chair, chin propped on her fist. "You always look slightly offended by ordinary things," she said. I glanced back at her. "That's unfair." "Is it?" I smiled despite myself. She stood, walked over, and with one firm pull, opened the door. "There," she said. "Show off." "Hopeless," she corrected. She brushed past me on her way back to her seat, and for a second, just a second, I caught the scent of her perfume. Something clean, familiar, the kind of scent that lingers in places after people leave. That night, when my laundry was done and hers was already packed, she stood by the door adjusting her scarf. "See you next week?" I asked, trying to sound casual and failing. She looked at me for a moment. Really looked. Then she smiled, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe," she said. She left before I could say anything else. I got home, dropped my bag by the door, and saw my phone light up on the kitchen counter. Unknown number. A single message. "Don't come to the laundromat next Thursday." And beneath it, after a pause long enough to feel deliberate, "If you want to know who I really am, meet me across the street tomorrow at 6. The next day, I stood across from the laundromat at 5:52, pretending to read the menu taped to the cafe window. It was the kind of place people forgot as soon as they left. 2 small tables outside, mismatched chairs inside, a pastry case that was always half empty by evening. I'd passed it dozens of times and never gone in. At 6 on the dot, Lena crossed the street. No coat this time. Just a cream sweater and dark trousers, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger without the laundromat's harsh lights, but somehow more guarded too. Like she'd stepped out of one version of herself and into another without deciding which one she preferred. "You came," she said. "You told me not to go somewhere I've been going every Thursday for months." That tends to get a person's attention. That got a smile out of her, brief and unwilling. "Come on." Inside, she ordered tea before I could ask what she wanted. Earl Grey for her. Black coffee for me. "You remembered," I said. "You always add too much sugar and then pretend you meant to." I laughed softly. "You notice a lot." "I have to." There was something in the way she said it that made me stop smiling. We sat near the back, where the window fogged faintly from the steam machine. Outside, the street looked blurred and far away. For a while, neither of us said anything. She stirred her tea long after the sugar had dissolved, spoon tapping the ceramic in a slow rhythm. Finally, she said, "My real name is Elena." I blinked. "Lena isn't real." "It is. Just not the name most people use." "Okay." She studied me for a second, like she was deciding whether I'd earn the next sentence. "I'm married." The words landed quietly, but they still landed. Not because I hadn't guessed there was something. A woman like her, careful, self-contained, always carried a story in the spaces she left open. But hearing it made the room feel smaller. "Oh," she nodded, eyes on her cup. "Technically," she said after a beat, "still married. We've lived in the same house for 2 years like polite strangers. Separate rooms, separate lives. We keep the shape of a marriage because it's easier than explaining the truth." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said the honest thing. "That sounds lonely." Her hand stopped moving. She looked at me then, not surprised exactly, but caught off guard. Most people say complicated. Maybe they don't know the difference. Something in her face shifted, just slightly, like a door unlatching somewhere far inside her. She exhaled through her nose, almost a laugh. "You're too young to sound this tired." "I'm 26, not 16. That's still young. You say that like 45 is ancient." "It feels ancient some days." I wanted to tell her she didn't look ancient, that she looked like the first person in months who made me forget to check my phone every 5 minutes, that the week between Thursdays had started feeling longer than it should. Instead, I folded the paper sleeve from my coffee cup into smaller and smaller pieces until it bent under my fingers. She noticed. "Nervous?" she asked. "A little." "Why?" "Because you make ordinary rooms feel dangerous. Because I've started imagining your voice in places you've never been. Because loneliness is easier when it stays familiar." I shrugged. "I'm not usually here." "That's not true." I frowned. She tilted her head. "You've been here a while, haven't you?" I knew what she meant before she said it. Not the cafe. This feeling. This suspended thing between wanting and refusing to name it. She reached across the table then, slow enough that I could have pulled away. She brushed a crease from the back of my hand with her thumb, like she was smoothing fabric. Nothing more. Just one light touch. But it stilled something in me I hadn't realized was always bracing. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone had finally noticed how hard I'd been trying not to need anything. After that afternoon, Thursdays stopped being enough. Not because anything happened, because nothing did. That was the problem. Elena, went back to being careful. At the laundromat, she was still there some weeks, still folded her clothes with that same quiet precision, still looked up when the door chimed and I walked in. But the text messages came less often than I wanted, and just often enough to keep me checking my phone more than I should. "Don't come today. He's home. Rain check. Thursday. Same time." No explanations. No promises. Just enough to make me understand that whatever space existed for me in her life was narrow, temporary, and probably not meant to exist at all. And still, I kept stepping into it. One Thursday, I came in soaked from a sudden storm. My hoodie clung to my shoulders, and the laundromat smelled like wet pavement and detergent. Elena was by the folding table, sleeves pushed up, hair pinned messily back. She looked at me and sighed. "You don't own an umbrella." "I do. It's just decorative." "That's a ridiculous answer." You smiled. I didn't. You almost did. That got me half a look. The kind that made my chest feel stupidly tight. She walked to her tote bag and pulled out a thermos. Sit. I blinked. Are you ordering me around? Yes. I sat. She poured tea into the little cap cup and handed it over. Her fingers brushed mine this time by accident, or maybe not. I couldn't tell anymore. With her, even small things felt loaded after. The tea was too hot. Bergamot and something floral. You always carry that? I asked. The thermos. The ability to act like you're annoyed while doing something kind. She leaned against the machine beside me, arms folded. I'm not kind. I'm practical. You look like you were about to drip on everything. Devastating. You'll recover. Outside, rain streaked the windows in long silver lines. Inside, the dryers hummed low and steady. The owner was in the back, radio playing softly through static. For a while, we just sat there. She watched the storm. I watched her hands, how she tucked her fingers into her sleeves when she was thinking, how her thumb rubbed lightly against the seam like she was soothing herself without noticing. You do that when you're worried, I said. She looked over. Do what? That. She glanced down at her hand, then tucked both arms tighter across herself. You notice too much. I learned from you. That should have been light. A joke. Something easy. But her face changed. Not cold. Just farther away. This can't become something, she said quietly. There it was. The sentence that had been sitting between us all along. I stared at the tea in my hands because looking at her felt dangerous. I know. Do you? I looked up then. Her expression was careful, but only barely. Like she was holding herself together with things she no longer believed in. What do you think I want? I asked. She gave a small, humorless laugh. That's exactly what scares me. Before I could answer, the laundromat door opened. The bell above it chimed too sharply. A woman about Elena's age stepped inside, umbrella dripping onto the tile. She looked from me to Elena, then smiled in a way that was almost too neutral. Elena, she said, didn't know you were here. Elena had already stepped back. A full step. Maybe two. Too fast. This is Noah, she said. He lives nearby. The woman's eyes flicked between us. Noah. The sound of my own name in Elena's mouth, flattened, formal, shouldn't have hurt. But it did. The woman left after a few minutes. Just picking up dry cleaning from the owner. Harmless. Ordinary. Still, the room never settled again. When my load finished, I stood to leave. Elena followed me to the door. The rain had stopped, but the pavement still gleamed under the streetlights. I'm sorry, she said. For what? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For making this feel real. For making me forget it wasn't. For stepping close enough that now distance felt personal. Instead, she reached up and fixed my hood where it had folded under at the collar. Her fingers lingered at the back of my neck. Too long. Her face was close enough that I could see the tiny crease between her brows. The breath she took before she stopped herself. I thought, just for a second, that she might kiss me. She thought it too. I know she did. Because she looked at my mouth, then shut her eyes like she was disappointed in herself. And when she stepped back, she took the warmth of the whole room with her. A week passed after the laundromat door closed between us. No texts. No Thursdays. Nothing. I told myself it was better that way. That whatever this was, had been, would eventually shrink into something manageable. A strange memory attached to dryer sheets and bergamot tea. One of those things you think about once in a while and then stop because there's no point. But loneliness has a way of making liars out of people. Mine came back in familiar forms. I started taking the long way home from work just to pass the laundromat, even when I had no laundry. I checked my phone at stoplights. Opened our message thread. Closed it. Opened it again. There were 6 texts from her in total. None of them said anything that should have mattered this much. On Tuesday night, just after 10, my phone lit up. Walk. That was it. No hello. No explanation. Just one word that somehow made my chest tighten. I found her 3 blocks from my apartment, near the riverside path that cut through the city park. It wasn't really a river, more a narrow stretch of dark water edged by concrete and old iron railings. But at night, with the streetlights reflected in it, it almost looked softer than it was. Elena stood by the railing in a wool coat, hands tucked into her pockets. You came fast, she said. You texted like the building was on fire. That got a breath of laughter. It's not. Good. I wasn't dressed for heroics. She looked at me then, and something about her face made the joke fall flat. You okay? She nodded too quickly, which meant no. We started walking without deciding to. The path was mostly empty except for one man jogging past us and a couple sitting too close on a bench, sharing earbuds. Neither of us said much at first. Our footsteps filled in the silence. Gravel, water, the occasional wind moving through bare branches. Finally, Elena said, "That woman at the laundromat. Mara. She's my husband's sister." I looked over. She told him she saw me there. With you. There it was. The thing that had been circling us from the beginning. What happened? He asked questions. And I lied. She said it plainly, but her jaw tightened after. I waited. He looked relieved, she said after a while. That was the worst part. I frowned. Why? Because he didn't care enough for the truth to hurt. The words landed somewhere deep in me. We stopped walking near an empty bench. Elena sat first, looking out at the water. I sat beside her, leaving space that felt ridiculous the second I did it. She noticed. You're being careful. I'm trying to be decent. That sounds exhausting. I let out a breath. You make it difficult. She turned to me fully then. Do I? Yes. The word came out before I could soften it. Something flickered in her expression. Not surprise. Relief, maybe. Or fear dressed as relief. I rubbed my palms together against the cold. I don't know what you want from me, I said quietly. Some days it feels like you want me close enough to prove something to yourself. Other days you disappear like I imagined all of it. Her eyes dropped to my hands. You think I'm using you. I think you're scared. That made her look up sharply. You're 26, she said. You have your whole life waiting. I'm 45. I'm married to a man I stopped loving so gradually I didn't notice until it was already over. I have a daughter in college who still thinks I know what I'm doing. I have a house full of furniture I chose and a life I stayed in, because leaving felt crueler than staying. She swallowed. And then you looked at me like I was still here. The last word almost disappeared in the wind. Not beautiful. Not desirable. Here. Real. Wanted. My throat tightened. Elena, no. She shook her head, but her voice was softer now. Frayed at the edges. You don't get to be kind about this. Don't make me feel noble for pulling away. I wasn't going to. She blinked. What were you going to do? There it was. The question sitting between us all this time. Streetlight above us. Her breath in the cold. My hand inches from hers on the bench. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, she didn't look away. She kissed me before I could answer. Not dramatic. Not reckless. Just a small, trembling surrender. Her hand came up first, fingers cold from the night, brushing my jaw like she was still deciding whether to stop. Then her mouth, soft and careful, like she was trying not to break something she hadn't meant to touch. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. Maybe less. Long enough to ruin the version of restraint we'd both been pretending to protect. When she pulled back, she looked almost angry. At herself. At me. At the whole absurd tenderness of it. No, she said, standing too quickly. That was a mistake. The cold hit me all at once where her warmth had been. Elena, don't. She hugged her coat tighter around herself, staring out at the black water. I knew this would happen. What exactly? This. She gestured between us, frustrated now. You making me feel 16 and 80 at the same time. Despite everything, I almost smiled. But her face stopped me. She looked scared. Not of me. Of what wanting something might ask her to destroy. I can't do this, she said. I can't become someone I don't recognize because I wanted one selfish thing. You think this is selfish? I have a daughter, she said sharply, like I'd forgotten. Mina comes home next month. She still thinks her parents are. Not perfect, but intact. I have spent years making peace with the life I chose. I don't get to set it on fire because I met someone in a laundromat. That should have been enough. Maybe it was. Because I didn't argue. Some part of me knew there was no speech that could make this simpler. No perfect sentence that could flatten age, marriage, history, shame. So I just nodded. Okay. The word hurt more than I expected. She looked at me like she wanted me to fight harder. That was the cruelest part. She wanted me to make it easy to stay, to take the choice from her. But love, or whatever half-grown, dangerous thing this was. Doesn't become less real just because you force it into a better shape. Sometimes being decent means leaving the wound clean. I stood. Good night, Elena. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I walked home alone. The next morning, I blocked out Thursday on my calendar and worked late. Then the Thursday after that. And the one after. My laundry piled up in the corner of my room until I ran out of clean socks. I started using the overpriced pickup service near my office just so I wouldn't have to walk past Ninth. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. Then every hour. Then only before bed. Elena texted twice. Are you all right? 3 days later. I saw your light on last night. I read both messages and said nothing. Not to punish her. Mostly because I didn't know what answer wouldn't pull me right back under. I started sleeping with the TV on again just to fill the apartment with sound. I answered messages from friends I'd ignored for months. Went out for drinks with coworkers I barely liked. Sat in loud bars and nodded at jokes half a second too late. Everything felt strangely overlit. Like I'd stepped out of a movie before the ending and was now stuck in the lobby, waiting for someone to tell me if I'd missed anything important. One Sunday afternoon, I was carrying groceries up the stairs to my building when I saw something by my door. A thermos. Dark green. Slight dent near the lid. Hers. No note. No message. Just the thermos sitting there like an accusation. Or an apology. Or maybe both. I picked it up. It was still warm. I stood in the hallway for a long time, keys in one hand, the thermos in the other. My phone was in my pocket. Her chat still open. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Come upstairs. Why now? I miss. I stared at the blinking cursor until the screen dimmed. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I took the thermos inside and set it on my kitchen counter like it might explode. It didn't. It just sat there beside a bowl of oranges and a stack of unopened mail, looking absurdly familiar. Domestic in a way that made my apartment feel suddenly smaller. More honest. I didn't open it for an hour. When I finally unscrewed the lid, steam rose up. Earl Grey. Still hot. Which meant she hadn't left it long ago. My chest tightened so fast it made me dizzy. I was already at the door before I'd fully decided. Elena lived 8 blocks away. I knew because I'd once followed the shape of her life through things she'd mentioned without meaning to, street names, a florist she liked, the grocery store that overcharged for avocados. It had felt harmless then. Now, walking there with her thermos in my hand, it felt like stepping into the part of the story neither of us had been brave enough to touch. Her building was older than mine. Brick. Narrow windows. A brass intercom with half the names worn off. I stood outside for a full minute, staring at her buzzer. Apartment 3B. My thumb hovered over it. Then I heard the front door click. Elena stepped out. She stopped when she saw me. For a second, neither of us moved. She looked tired. Not in the dramatic way movies do tired. No ruined mascara, no collapse. Just real. Hair loosely tied back. Sweater sleeves pushed up. Face stripped of all the composure she wore like armor. You came, she said softly. You left tea at my door like a ransom note. That startled a small laugh out of her. I didn't know what else to do. I held up the thermos. This is either very manipulative or very specific. A bit of both. We stood there in the thin yellow spill of the building's front light, the street quiet around us. I almost buzzed, I said. I know. You were watching. Her mouth tipped slightly. I've been standing in the hallway for 10 minutes. That shouldn't have made me smile, but it did. She looked down at the thermos. I thought if I saw you, I'd know what to say. And I still don't. That was the first honest thing either of us had said that night. So I gave her one back. I was angry. She nodded. I know. I wasn't angry because you were scared. I was angry because you made me feel like wanting something real was the reckless part. Her face tightened. That wasn't fair. No. She folded her arms, then unfolded them again. A nervous habit I'd only seen when she was close to saying something she couldn't take back. I've spent years making myself smaller, she said. So small that everyone around me stayed comfortable. My husband, my daughter, even me. She gave a brief, bitter laugh. You know what's pathetic? I got so good at disappearing that when someone finally noticed me, I panicked. I stepped closer. You didn't disappear. I did. Her voice thinned. You just happened to be looking. The street was so quiet I could hear someone upstairs rinsing dishes. A dog barking half a block away. Her breathing. All the ordinary sounds of people living their lives while ours sat here, unfinished. I'm not asking you to burn your life down, I said. I'm not asking for promises. Or some grand plan. She looked at me then, properly. What are you asking? The answer had been loud in me for weeks. But saying it still felt like stepping onto ice without knowing if it would hold. I'm asking you to stop deciding for both of us. Her eyes filled, though she blinked the tears back before they could fall. That's terrifying. I know. I could lose things. So could I. Silence again. But not the kind that closes doors. The kind that waits. Finally, Elena let out a breath that sounded almost like surrender. My husband moved out yesterday, she said. I stared at her. What? We've been circling it for years. Mara telling him about you just. She searched for the words. Made the pretending feel embarrassing. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or guilty or both. Probably both. I'm not saying this makes us simple, she said quickly. It doesn't. Mina will have questions. People will talk. I'm still scared half the time. You're here. Yes. That's enough for tonight. Something in her face softened at that. Not because the fear was gone, but because I hadn't asked her to become fearless to be worthy of staying. She stepped closer then, close enough that our coats brushed. You make things feel less impossible, she said. I smiled, small and helpless. You make tea feel emotionally loaded. That got a Rayal laugh this time. Warm, unguarded. She reached for my hand like it was the simplest thing in the world. It wasn't. That was what made it matter. Her fingers laced through mine, tentative at first, then firmer. She looked at me, eyes tired and clear and finally still. Okay, she said. And for once, it felt like enough. People think endings arrive cleanly. A signed paper, a packed box, a final conversation where everyone says the thing they should have said years ago. Mostly, they don't. Mostly, endings happen the way weather changes. Slowly enough that you don't notice until one morning the air feels different and you realize you've been dressing for the wrong season. It took 6 months for Elena's divorce to become official. 6 months of paperwork and awkward dinners with her daughter, Mina, who came home from college that spring and looked at me with the sharp, inherited intelligence of someone who could spot dishonesty before dessert. The first time Elena told her about us, Mina didn't yell. She just sat at the kitchen table, turning her spoon in a bowl of soup gone cold. For how long? She asked. Elena told her the truth. Not long, she said, but longer than I want to pretend. Mina looked at me then. You're younger than me by, like, a decade emotionally. I almost choked on my water. Elena covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. And somehow, that broke the tension more than anything careful could have. It wasn't simple after that. There were weeks Elena doubted herself again. Days when she stared too long at unopened legal envelopes. Mornings when guilt sat heavy in her shoulders and made her quieter than usual. I learned not to rush in with solutions. Some kinds of fear don't need fixing. They just need someone willing to stay while they pass. So I stayed. Not heroically, just consistently. I made coffee in the mornings when she forgot to. Fixed the cabinet hinge in her kitchen she'd been ignoring for 2 years. Sat beside her on the couch while she reread documents she hated. Let her go quiet without treating silence like rejection. We built something in the ordinary. That was the whole point. Thursday nights became ours first. Not because we meant them to. Just because habit is powerful, and some habits deserve better endings than they started with. We still went to the laundromat sometimes, even after Elena finally got the machine in her building repaired. Mostly for the joke of it. Mostly because the owner had started giving us a look every time we came in that said he knew more than he let on. Elena still folded clothes too carefully. I still forgot the detergent tray at least once every few visits just to hear her sigh and call me hopeless. Show off, I'd mutter when she fixed it. Still true, she'd say. There were other routines too. Black coffee at 8:47 on Sundays because that was the exact minute her kettle took to boil, and because, once, I'd made fun of how specific she was about timing. The riverside bench where we'd nearly ruined ourselves before we learned how to stay. The thermos she still carried everywhere, dent and all. Sometimes she'd pour tea into the cap and hand it to me without looking, like it was muscle memory now. Like love could become practical and still keep its shape. One evening in late autumn, we were walking home from the laundromat under a sky already turning dark at 5. Our clean clothes were warm in the bag between us. The street smelled like rain, even though it hadn't started yet. Elena slipped her hand into mine without warning. Not tentative anymore. Just sure. I used to think wanting more from life was a kind of betrayal, she said. I looked at her. She was older than me. Wiser in some ways. More frightened in others. Still stubborn. Still careful. Still capable of disappearing into herself if the world got too loud. But now, when she did, she came back. That was the difference. And now? I asked. She smiled, small, private, meant only for me. Now I think maybe I was just lonely for too long. There are people who arrive in your life like thunder. And there are people who arrive like a room slowly warming after years of winter. No grand speech. No perfect timing. Just someone who notices when your coffee's gone cold. Someone who remembers the right tray. Someone who looks at you long enough that you stop feeling invisible. When we got to her building, she took the thermos from my hand and nudged my shoulder lightly. You're carrying this because I like feeling useful. You like being dramatic. Same thing. She laughed, the full kind now, easy and unguarded. Then she leaned in, kissed me once like it was the most ordinary thing in the world, and said, "Come upstairs." This time, there was no fear in it. Just warmth. Familiarity. The kind of peace you don't notice at first because it doesn't announce itself. It just stays. And I followed her upstairs the way you follow light into a room you already know you're going to keep. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?